Are you ready?
No, definitely not ready. If I butcher the start of this, we'll capture it at the end, the intro. Happy Saturday, everybody. Welcome to the Bet on Her podcast. We're doing an extra episode this week. Really excited to have our guest with us today. She is a clinical and sports psychologist, former D1 volleyball player at UC Irvine, has her master's and PhD in clinical psychology. You own your own practice, and it specializes in therapy for athletes, and you are a part-time staff psychologist at Stanford University. Also, wanted to highlight this. You're a high school state champion with Gina Urango. Welcome.
That's right.
Welcome
on the Bet on Her podcast, Dr. Riley Cropper G.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Woo! Pew, pew, pew. Welcome, Dr. Cropper.
Doctor. Just for some background, so people know, Riley and I were best friends, and we've been best friends since we were like in 6th grade. Mm-hmm. And so it's really exciting to have you on here. And Kelly mentioned this before we started recording, but it's nice to have the tables turned a little bit, and we're going to ask you some questions.
Put me on the spot.
Yeah.
We are putting you on the spot. We are excited.
But, you know, so obviously we grew up together. We played volleyball together. You played at UCI. But most recently, you were married.
Yes.
And I was in the wedding. Kelly was at the wedding.
Yes.
And how
Maid of honor here.
how was married life?
It's great.
Yeah.
It feels no different in the best way possible. So, yeah, it's amazing. It's almost a year already, which is crazy.
That is crazy. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. He, her husband, Andrew, he's awesome. But I always wanted to know the question. So being a therapist and, you know, being in a serious relationship, do you ever find yourself like psychoanalyzing your husband?
I wouldn't say psychoanalyzing, but I do find myself pulling from strategies, I would say. And in conversations, I'm like, maybe we should try this or that, and definitely pulling from that side of who I am.
That's good. Is he responsive towards that?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I think it's also important to mention too, because, you know, I was in your wedding and I did have to miss an AVP event. Obviously, I would choose your wedding over that no matter what. But I think for athletes, you know, like we tend to make our sport so much, like such a big thing in our life, when in reality, like there's other things that are super important, like relationships with our friends and being there for special moments. So I know I've talked to a couple players about it before, but, you know, I made the mistake in another friendship and it put a damper on it. And, you know, looking back, like I'll never want to miss a moment like that. So I was happy to be part of it, and I'm happy for you.
Thank
and
you.
Yeah,
I'm so glad you both were there.
Wouldn't have missed it, right?
And we actually tried to plan around the AVP schedule, but it just didn't work out that year.
It always happens like that.
Yeah.
That's all right.
So then my question, being a therapist, do you see a therapist yourself?
I absolutely do. And I think every therapist should see a therapist. And if you're looking for a therapist, I like to ask them if they are seeing a therapist, because it just helps them process their own stuff and make sure that's not coming into the room and kind of getting in the way of things. So I definitely see a therapist weekly. And I think it's really important to have that space and talk about the work I do there. You know, it's tough work, and just make sure I'm in the best shape possible mentally to do the work that I do.
I kind of want to know the start of how you, I guess, became interested in becoming a therapist. Was there a moment for you that you knew that you wanted to get into this career path?
Yeah, I think there is this kind of thing about, therapists become therapists for a reason, and it's because they have like their own stuff and their own trauma, or they're messed up. And like, I think a lot of therapists have had an experience in their life that took them to therapy, and then they want to do that for other people. And that was definitely my experience when I was younger. I was like a pretty anxious kid. My parents had me see a therapist, and I found that really helpful, learned some strategies. And then I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And then I think growing up, I felt like I was just that person that people came to for advice or to talk. And I was like, I guess I could do this for a living. And then, you know, being an athlete my whole life, that is where the sports side of things came into the picture, and wanting to work with athletes, because I think it's really helpful to see someone who understands that experience and like that piece of the identity.
Can you talk a little bit more about the benefits of therapy for an athlete who is active career-wise in the sports industry, or is a veteran, or is retired?
Yeah, I think there are lots of different benefits, just like for people in general, just having space to talk through everything that's going on in your life, get support, be validated. Like that is so simple, but so helpful. And then learn different strategies. So say you're newer to your sport and you're trying to break through, like how are you building that confidence and learning strategies to help with that? Maybe if you're a veteran, you're starting to get to the end of your career and you're not wondering like who you are without your sport and starting to explore that. So I think there's a lot of different ways it could be helpful, but just having someone that you trust that you can talk to is pretty powerful. And then, adding in the strategies here and there that can be helpful too.
How does one go about searching for a therapist?
Great question, because it can be pretty difficult. So one piece is like, are you trying to use insurance or not? And if you are trying to use insurance, the best, easiest way to go about it is just like call the number on the back of your insurance card, ask them about your mental health benefits. Do you need to see someone who's in network with your insurance versus out of network in your insurance? And if it's in network, then you can ask them to send you names and numbers of people who are in network and will be covered. You can also use like search tools online that can help you search by insurance type. If you don't need to use insurance or you can see someone out of network, then you can be a lot more flexible and just kind of search based on what might be of interest to you if you are wanting someone who works with athletes or not, or certain specialties like anxiety or depression. Most important is just that you feel like you can talk to the person, like that you trust them and you can be like yourself and be comfortable to share things about yourself. That's, I'd say, more important than any of the specialties.
What steps did you take in order to become a therapist? Like what were the first steps that you took?
Yeah, I mean, in undergrad, I did major in psychology for my bachelor's degree. That was helpful, although I don't think absolutely necessary. You can still go to grad school and be a therapist, even if you don't major in psychology, but that's what I did. And then applied to PhD programs, so I had to take the GRE and go through that whole application process. Got into a clinical psychology program in San Diego, moved down there, was there for 4 years. And then, part of that is taking classes, getting clinical experience through the program for a few years, writing a dissertation and defending that, which you both were there for as well.
Yeah, that's right.
And then you do a 1-year internship where you're just accruing all these clinical hours, again, just getting experience practicing therapy. And then I did a postdoc as well for a year at Stanford, and again, accruing more hours. Then you take 2 licensing exams, and once you pass that, then you get your license number. So there are a few different paths, but that's the path that I took.
So in total, how many years did it take you to get certified?
It took 5, 6, 7, I'd say, yeah.
And you've earned the title of Dr. Krappa G.
Doctor.
Dr. Krappa. I guess one more thing that I wanted to add as far as, I guess, what's your why in regards to being a therapist, and what are maybe some goals now that you're an active therapist?
Yeah. I think the why just always goes back to trying to support people, whatever they're going through. To me, it's just a pretty simple job. Like, it is demanding in that I'm hearing about a lot of emotional stuff and difficult stuff, but all I have to do is like show up for the person and be supportive and give some strategies, and like that feels easy for me in some ways. So that's, I think, the why, just supporting people. Goals. So I have a private practice and I do that 2 days a week. And just, I think the goal is to continue to build that up until it can be my full-time gig eventually. And I do really want to focus on working with athletes specifically. I do that already, but I also see just other people in the community, general clinical psychology. And I think I really want to try to focus on the therapy for athletes side of things.
What is the difference? So there's obviously a handful of different types of therapy. So what do you specialize in? What are other types that you can look for? And then what do they mean exactly?
Yeah. So I'm a clinical psychologist, which means I'm a therapist first. Like, yes, I work with athletes. Yes, I have training in sports psychology techniques, performance-based things, but I'm a therapist first. So if someone comes in and we're talking and I realize like they have an eating disorder or there's something like that going on, I feel equipped to be able to handle that as a therapist. And then there are like sports performance or sports psychology consultants who went through like a different training process where they focused on performance and sports specifically. And so that's just a different certification, takes a little bit less time, but that would be focusing on like just performance and how do we help you achieve in your sport. Whereas not as much on like the therapy, anxiety, depression side of things.
Okay, so I've looked for therapists in the past before, and I've actually sought your advice, and you've helped me find some different people, which has been super helpful. But like, kind of, what would you recommend somebody who's first looking for a therapist or a sports psych, whatever it may be? Like, what should they look for when searching?
I think it's different for everyone. Like, what is important to you in finding that person? Doesn't matter what gender they are, or that they do work with athletes and have that experience, or that they are knowledgeable about eating disorders, for example. Like, what is important to you and what are you seeking support for? And starting with that. Also now in the age of like COVID, are you looking to see someone in person or on Zoom? And that makes a difference as well.
I've noticed that it's almost harder to find a therapist now that you can see in person.
Yeah.
So
It is.
yeah, but then also the convenience of being able to find somebody that you like and resonate with that maybe doesn't live close by, then, you know, that's still also helpful too, that you can talk to them online.
Yeah. And if you think about it as like running a business as a therapist, you just have way less overhead if you're working from home and seeing people remotely than if you're renting an office space, you know.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people have started to do that after COVID.
Do you do yours out of your home?
I do half and half.
Oh,
so
nice.
on Tuesdays, I work from home, see people remotely. And then on Thursdays, I do have an office in Palo Alto where I see folks in person.
So anybody in Palo Alto looking for a therapist?
Anyone up on the farm?
Yeah, the farm. Lots of people on the farm.
What about like, how is it working at Stanford too? Because you said, you know, you've been working there for a couple of years.
Yeah, it's been like 6 years now. I think this is my 7th year.
that.
So yeah, Stanford is a unique place. It is intense. We're very busy. It's good like that students are utilizing the services. We're very well utilized. So much so that it's a little bit tough. We can only offer like short-term therapy, and we basically help students connect to resources off campus from there because we don't have enough people to like see everyone who's seeking therapy. So it's nice that everyone is reaching out and wanting to get connected and use those resources. And also like we have to find the balance and help them connect to longer term resources too.
This year is a big year for a lot of athletes. It's Olympic qualifying year.
Mm-hmm.
And there seems to be a common theme with all of our guests that come on is they don't know who they are outside of the sport of volleyball. They also feel immense pressure to gain all these points and put a lot of stress on themselves. So, you know, I think that all of this, there's like a fly there.
Yeah.
All of this is really interesting and valuable. Is there anything that we can share with the audience and the listeners in terms of coping mechanisms for anxiety? So someone experiencing an anxiety attack.
Yeah. You want to do some belly breathing and try it out?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So the biggest thing to help prevent a panic attack, or even when you're just feeling anxious before the show, I was doing a little belly breathing myself. So, you know, breathing is really key because it helps calm your body down, lets your body know like we're okay. If you're breathing calmly and slowly, your body knows like nothing is actually wrong. It just sends that signal to your body that everything's okay. So there's a strategy. I don't know how I'm going to do this with a mic, but
You can walk us through it.
okay. You can put one hand on your belly and one hand on your chest, ideally. And you want to try to breathe where you're moving the hand on your belly only and keeping the one on your chest still. So you really want to push your belly all the way out as you breathe in and hold for a few seconds and then exhale. And you really want to see that like rise and fall of your belly. So I can show you here.
I already feel so
Yeah,
relaxed.
right? It's nice.
And honestly, because I'm the only one wearing the headset, I can hear you breathing and I feel relaxed. So I'm just,
Yeah. It helps on a physiological level, and you only need to take like a few short breaths like that. And the good thing about this strategy as well is that you can do it without anyone knowing you're doing it. Like, yes, you can sit there and do that and help you, but you could also, I could do it right now and you wouldn't even know. So it's good for like if you're taking a test or you are performing in a sport and you're just taking a few deep breaths like that right from your belly.
I have a tendency to breathe in my chest, so to be able to have both hands there and just move the bottom one, that was really helpful. And then I guess, like athletes have performance anxiety, stuff like that. But then also, I remember they were talking about this at the last Olympics. It might have been about a gymnast or someone, but the yips.
Yeah.
And kind of like maybe explain what the yips are and then how you might go about telling an athlete to work through that.
Yeah. The yips is basically a sensation where, you are a trained, skilled athlete, and then you try to do a skill that you've done a million times, and all of a sudden you just can't do it. Like there is some sort of mental block there. It was Simone Biles at the Olympics.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know that it was the yips. I think they had a different term for it, like for gymnastics specific, that she was kind of losing where she was while she was in the air. And it was really dangerous for her because she didn't know how to land properly. But we see this a lot in golf, like when putting, people like hit the ball and it just goes crazy, or like in baseball, they're trying to throw and they just can't do it anymore. So I guess it would be just going back to the basics, like really working on, how to do that skill, really break it down piece by piece and figuring out, I guess, what is mentally going on that is getting in the way. And it can be so harmful because it just builds up bigger and bigger the more that you can't do it. And so trying to take it back to the basics, you can do this skill. You've done it 100 times, millions of times, and breaking down each piece of the skill.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I feel like I have the passing yips right now. Just like I've been struggling.
Yeah.
And like I feel like whenever I take a break from practice or volleyball, even if it's just a week, and then I come back, and for some reason my passing is just so much better if once I take the break. And I feel like that's my one skill when I'm playing, that the more I'm trying to do it, the more I'm like getting in my head about it, the more I'm thinking about it, the more that I mess up on it. So yeah.
We tend to overthink a lot of things. So the brain is very powerful. So it's just simplifying it. So I'm sure you would tell your clients that, like, just keep it simple. What kind of tools, let's say for us, if we're overthinking our passing, what kind of tools would you give us?
Yeah. One thing that comes to mind is like visualization of what you're trying to do versus what you're trying not to do. So like if you're having all these images of, I'm shanking this ball or I'm getting aced, trying to focus on what are you trying to do instead? What are you doing with your platform? Where are you aiming? Focusing on like what you can actually see in front of you, the ball coming at you. Take it back to like what you're trying to do instead of all the negative thoughts about what could go wrong.
We were hoping that you might be okay with doing a little mini therapy session. We have some,
We're really going to get vulnerable here. And I think it's going to be really fun. So.
I think it's important for us to kind of, share with listeners as well. We're human too. We deal with issues as individuals, athletes. And, obviously I'd love to hear your advice on a couple of different topics, but I can start if you want. And one thing, I guess, so I'll just preface, like, this is something that I've always dealt with as an athlete, ever since I was a kid, even in school too, like not even related towards volleyball. So my biggest issue is that like my self-talk is really bad, and I've worked on it, but it still, lingers. And so, but the overarching thing is that I'm my own worst critic. And so I don't know what advice you might have for me regarding that. Or if you want to like ask me some questions, get down to the nitty gritty of it.
Ask you some questions. So let's just go with, if you make a mistake, what are the types of things you might say to yourself or that might run through your head?
Yeah, I, if I make a mistake, I hear myself saying like, oh, like, why didn't you get that? You should have gotten that. Or missing a serve, sometimes I'll even hear myself say, you suck. So like I can be pretty harsh with myself. But those are just a couple examples.
Okay. So simple fix to start with is I think just adjusting the self-talk a little bit. Like you said, you already know that that's the issue, but when you make a mistake, can you be intentional about how you're talking to yourself? Like, what would you say to your teammate if they made a mistake, or to a friend? If Kelly came to you and said, I'm struggling with this, like, what would you tell her to say to herself, right? And can you say some of that to yourself instead? So when you don't get a ball, what else could you say to yourself?
You got the next one.
Yeah. And instead of
It's so simple.
I know it's but it's the way you say it.
Practice it though.
Right.
You have to practice it. It has to be intentional, and it's going to take time to work on that. And instead of, oh, I should have gotten that, it can be as simple as like, I can get that. I know I can get that. I got it next time, right? Just like that small shift. It doesn't have to be anything huge or profound, but a small shift and, oh, okay, yes, I know I can get that ball. I got it next time.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, because I don't think of it like that. You know, it's like being compassionate with myself the way that I would be compassionate towards my partner or someone else. So helpful reminder.
Cheered.
Boom. Wins a tournament. Thanks, Cropper. I guess for me, and this is being vulnerable, but performance anxiety is something that I deal with. I kind of tend to get results, let that kind of linger a little bit. So I guess when I'm competing, how do I just be present in the moment versus looking too far ahead of like, oh, I want to win this tournament, but maybe I look at the draw and I get freaked out about the bracket or our seed. And how would I deal with that? Or how would others deal with that if they're in the same boat?
Few different things. Pre-game, pre-tournament routine, calm, and it's your normal thing that you're going through, basically to prevent getting like too hyped up or too anxious. Sometimes you want to be really hyped up, right? Like I've seen you be hyped up and that can be helpful. But if you're feeling more anxious, nervous, you know, maybe you want to calm it down a little bit. You want to do some belly breathing before your match. You want to listen to like some nice calm music instead of like the hype music. And you could also kind of use those nerves or anxiety as, think about it as like you're really excited. You love this sport. You just can't wait to get out there, and kind of reframing how you see that feeling instead of, oh my gosh, I'm so anxious. I'm so nervous. I'm so excited. I can't wait to get out there, right? And just kind of reframing that feeling a little bit.
So situational, say that you're about to win the match and it's like 18-all, you're close to the finish line. How would I like mentally, or what kind of tools can I use in that moment of like not looking too far ahead of like, okay, we're so close to 21, we got this in the bag. How can I guess, take it step by step or point by point? What are some tools that I can use in that situation where the pressure's high, anxiety builds, I can feel it in my throat?
I feel
As
like
I am right now.
Now,
So it's like really being in that moment, whether it's like you're on the highest stage or if it's like an important match, like how do you handle that?
Start with that deep breath.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. Start with that deep breath. And then again, I think instead of thinking about, oh my gosh, we're so close, I'm right there. Okay. What do you really need to be focusing on for that point? Are you looking at the server? Are you looking at the ball coming across the net? Like, are you thinking about the play that you're going to run with your teammate? Like, go back to the mechanics of the game and focus on that and what you actually need to do to get you to that point instead of just thinking about that coming up in the future.
Amazing. Thank you. Little triggers. I like that. Perfect. Thanks, Riley.
Where can someone kind of get your contact or get in touch with you in regards to getting some therapy?
Yeah. So like I said, I am building up the private practice. I have a pretty full 2 days right now, but do want to build it up further. So I just created a new Instagram at
nice.
Therapy for Athletes. And I'm updating my website right now as well, but it's therapy-for-athletes.com.
Cool.
And obviously it'll be in the link in my bio.
Oh, awesome.
Amazing. We'll give you that follow.
Thank you.
I guess I had one more question too that I feel like has come up more and more often, and I feel like I've utilized it and seen the benefit of it, but kind of like mindfulness too. So maybe kind of explain a little bit of what mindfulness is, and then maybe because I know you recommend some apps too that are super helpful with that. But yeah, I would love to hear more about that.
I'd say as just an overview, mindfulness is just trying to connect to the present moment. So kind of what you were talking about, Kelly, like how do you stay present? And it could be focusing on your breathing or focusing on your feet in the sand and how you can feel that contact there. Or right now, like, oh, okay, I can feel the backs of my legs on this chair. I'm here grounded in this present moment, so that you aren't getting too ahead of yourself or too anxious or worked up, but you're grounded, present, calm. And you can practice that on your own by just focusing on some of those things, or you could do kind of more guided meditation. I love just going to YouTube, searching in meditation for anxiety or like meditation for performance, meditation for sleep. There are also lots of apps out there, Calm, Headspace, stuff like that. Even Peloton has a lot of mindfulness content that's really good. And so you can practice that, and the best way to do it is practice it for a few minutes a day, and then you can use it when you really need it or when you're anxious, but you've already practiced that tool and you can access it more easily.
Yeah, I like to do, my Aura Ring app has some breathing exercise ones, so I like to do that before I go to sleep sometimes.
Yeah.
And then I've been using like there's like 12-hour long Spotify playlists, or like a white noise, rain, breathing, stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it's really helpful.
Like I said, I use these strategies like even before
Day-to-day.
coming here today. Like I'm going to do some deep breathing and I'm going to make sure I'm calm and present, and it's helpful for anyone.
Yeah, we appreciate you being here, Riley.
So much. I
Thank you.
know.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
So we like to end our podcast with 2 questions. The first one being, how do you take a bet on yourself, or how have you taken a bet on yourself in the past?
I think I've definitely taken a bet on myself by opening up my own private practice and really pursuing that and owning a business. And it's hasn't really felt that scary, if I'm being honest. But when I really like zoom out and think about it, yeah, I rely on people showing up to therapy with me to make a living, and that's betting on myself.
And so I'm going to open the floor to you. And you could share whatever's on your heart or mind with our listeners, with us here in the room, whatever you want to do. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I guess just a plug for mental health in general, that everyone struggles at times. We all go through stuff. There's no shame in seeing a therapist or working on your mental health. And there are people out there that can help. And even if you just talk to a friend or let someone know that you're struggling, you can get some support. And also, I'm just really proud of you guys for doing this podcast. Like, I think it's so cool. And this is really important work to focus on women in sport. And I'm just really proud of you guys and happy to be here.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, thank you for being
Appreciate
here.
it.
Thanks, girl.
It was funny because while we were setting up and stuff, Kelly kept saying, Dr. Cropper.
Dr. Crapper. I love saying it. It's so cool. Like when you finally made it, I was like, you're a doctor. How cool
I know.
is that? And like you
It's
worked so
wild.
hard and you've been there for both of us.
So much, yeah.
There were some dark times, and to lean on you during those times, it was really refreshing to have you in our corner. So yeah, hard work pays off, and we're happy to see where you're going. And thank you for being on our pod. And
Absolutely.
hopefully people will take some notes with a couple cues that you gave us.
Yeah, these are just like quick little snippets,
Yeah.
right? Imagine the work that can be done if you're seeing someone regularly and like really working on this as part of your game.
And it's like so simple. You just have to put in the work and do it little, I guess, day by day, 3 times a day or whatever it is. So
I think it's also valuable, the fact that, and I keep bringing this up, but this seems to be the theme, is that you are, first and foremost, you're human beings. And regardless of where you are in terms of your status, your emotions matter. And I think it's important, like you said, to seek help. And I think you're setting the tone and setting an example to the younger generation and other women that are in the sport that can't allow themselves to be vulnerable and seek help and ask for help. So I think, this is a step in the right direction. But as long as we have individuals like yourselves pushing that line forward, I think others will continue to have the confidence to go forward and ask for help. Ask help from Dr. Riley Cropper.
yeah, amazing.
Yes.
So awesome. Thank you.
Thank everyone for joining me on the podcast and listening in. This is the Bet on Her podcast.
And cut.